Daniel had always kept the photograph in his wallet, tucked behind his driver's license where it wouldn't get damaged. The edges were slightly worn from years of handling, and the colors had faded just enough to give it that vintage look that made people assume it was older than it actually was. In the picture, a young girl with dark curls and bright eyes smiled back at the camera, wearing a yellow sundress that seemed to capture sunlight itself. "That's my sister Emma," he would tell people when they noticed the photo during casual conversations. The story always came naturally. How she lived across the country, how they didn't get to see each other often, how she was doing well in her marketing job in Portland. People would nod sympathetically, understanding the challenges of maintaining long-distance family relationships. Daniel worked as a maintenance supervisor at a mid-sized office building downtown, a job that suited his preference for routine and minimal social interaction. His colleagues knew him as reliable but quiet, the type who kept to himself during lunch breaks and rarely joined after-work gatherings. When they did chat, it was usually about work schedules or weekend plans, nothing too personal. The photograph had been with him for nearly 8 years now, ever since he'd found it tucked inside a used book he'd bought from a sidewalk vendor. Family Portraits of the Midwest, some coffee table book filled with candid shots of American families from the 1990s. The girl in the yellow dress had been on page 47, part of a larger family gathering. But something about her expression had caught his attention. She looked so genuinely happy, so full of life. At first, he just kept the book, but gradually he found himself looking at that particular page more and more. There was something comforting about the girl's smile, something that filled a space he hadn't even realized was empty. Eventually, he'd carefully cut out just her portion of the photograph, had it reprinted to wallet size, and began carrying it with him. The lie had started small. A co-worker named Jessica had seen him looking at the photo during his break and asked who it was. "My sister," had slipped out before he could think of anything else. The word felt strange on his tongue. He'd been an only child his entire life. But Jessica's warm smile made it seem like the right answer. From there, Emma's story had grown organically. She was 2 years younger than him, had always been the artistic one in the family, loved hiking and pottery classes. She'd moved to Portland for college and never moved back, but they texted regularly and called every few weeks. The details accumulated naturally over months of casual conversations, each addition making Emma feel more real, more like someone who truly existed in his life. Daniel's apartment was small but comfortable, filled with books and plants that he tended carefully. On his refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like a coffee cup, was a second copy of Emma's photo. This one slightly larger, printed on better paper. Visitors always assumed she was family, and he never corrected them. The routine of having a sister had become surprisingly comforting. When co-workers complained about family drama, Daniel could offer sympathetic understanding about sibling relationships. When holidays approached and people asked about his plans, he could mention visiting Emma or her visiting him, though something always came up that prevented the actual visit from happening. He'd even gone so far as to create an email account in Emma's name, sending himself occasional messages that he could reference in conversation. "Emma says Portland's been really rainy this month," he'd mentioned to Jessica, or, "My sister recommended this great documentary about urban gardening." The emails were never elaborate, just enough to maintain the illusion of regular contact. On this particular Thursday evening, Daniel sat at his kitchen table sorting through mail and planning his weekend. The photograph of Emma looked back at him from the refrigerator, and he found himself wondering, as he sometimes did, about the real girl in the picture. Where was she now? Did she remember that family gathering? Did she have siblings of her own? His phone buzzed with a text from his mother, asking if he wanted to come over for Sunday dinner. Daniel typed back his usual response. He'd try to make it, but might need to call Emma first to catch up. His mother had heard plenty about Emma over the years and always sent her regards, though she'd never actually spoken to her supposed granddaughter. As Daniel prepared for bed that night, he glanced once more at the wallet-sized photo before closing his wallet and placing it on the nightstand. Tomorrow would bring another day of casual conversations about his sister, another day of maintaining the gentle fiction that had somehow become an integral part of his identity. He had no way of knowing that tomorrow would also bring the phone call that would change everything. The call came at 11:47 a.m. on Friday. just as Daniel was finishing his inspection of the building's heating system. The number was unfamiliar, but something made him answer instead of letting it go to voicemail. "Is this Daniel Martinez?" The woman's voice was professional, but carried an undertone of urgency that immediately put him on edge. "Yes, this is Daniel. My name is Linda Chen, and I work for Patterson & Associates, a private investigation firm here in Chicago. I'm calling because we've been hired to locate family members of someone named Emma Catherine Whitmore, and your contact information came up in our search." Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. The name Emma sent a chill through him, but Whitmore wasn't the last name he'd invented for his fictional sister. "I'm sorry. I think there might be some mistake. I don't know anyone by that name. Sir, we have reason to believe you might have information about Emma Whitmore. She would be about 26 years old now. Dark hair, lived in the Midwest as a child. We found a connection through some old family records that mentioned your name." The description matched his Emma perfectly, but that had to be coincidence. "I really don't know who you're talking about," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice steady. "What is this regarding?" There was a pause on the other end. "Mr. Martinez, Emma Whitmore passed away 3 weeks ago in a car accident in Denver. She had no immediate family that we could locate, but we found some documents that suggested she might have relatives. Your name appeared in some old correspondence we found among her belongings." Daniel felt the world tilt slightly. The girl in his photograph was named Emma, looked exactly like the description, and would be about the right age. But it was impossible. He'd found that photo in a random book 8 years ago. "I'm very sorry for your loss, but I think you have the wrong person. Could I ask, do you have any family photos that might help us confirm or rule out a connection? Sometimes people don't realize how family relationships connect across generations." Something compelled Daniel to be honest, at least partially. "I do have a photo of someone named Emma, but she's not a relative. It's complicated. Would you be willing to meet with me? I'm actually in your area today following up on several leads. It would only take a few minutes, and it might help us solve this puzzle for Emma's estate." Against his better judgment, Daniel agreed to meet Linda at a coffee shop near his building during his lunch break. The rest of his morning was a blur of distraction and growing anxiety. He kept touching his wallet, feeling the familiar outline of Emma's photo, trying to convince himself this was all an elaborate coincidence. Linda Chen was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She was waiting at a corner table when Daniel arrived, a manila folder spread open in front of her. She stood and shook his hand with the practiced efficiency of someone who dealt with difficult conversations regularly. "Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Martinez. I know this is unusual." She gestured for him to sit. "Can I start by asking how you know Emma?" Daniel's mouth felt dry. "Like I said on the phone, I don't actually know her. I have a photograph, but it's not what you think." He pulled out his wallet and carefully extracted Emma's picture, placing it on the table between them. Linda's eyes widened immediately. "Oh my God!" She reached into her folder and pulled out a larger photograph. The same girl, the same yellow sundress, the same bright smile. But this one showed the full family gathering that Daniel remembered from the original book. "Where did you get this?" Linda asked, her professional composure cracking slightly. "From a book. A photography book about Midwest families. I bought it used about 8 years ago." Daniel's voice was barely above a whisper. "I cut out just her part of the photo. I've been telling people she was my sister." Linda stared at him for a long moment, then opened another file. "Mr. Martinez, Emma Whitmore grew up in Wisconsin with her grandparents after her parents died in an accident when she was 12. This photo was taken at a family reunion in 1998 when she was 8 years old. Her grandfather, Robert Whitmore, was an amateur photographer who contributed to several books about American family life. The coffee shop seemed to fade around them as the implications sank in. Daniel had been carrying a real person's photograph for 8 years, inventing stories about her, creating a relationship that never existed, and now that person was dead. "The strange thing," Linda continued, "is that we found your name in Emma's apartment. She had a small notebook where she wrote down random thoughts and observations. On one page, dated about 6 months ago, she wrote, Had the strangest dream about someone named Daniel Martinez. Felt like I knew him, but I don't think we've ever met. Daniel felt like he might be sick. That's impossible. I thought so too until I saw your photo. Linda leaned forward. Mr. Martinez, I think there's more to this story than either of us understand. The drive to Emma's apartment in Denver took Daniel 6 hours, but he barely noticed the time passing. Linda had given him the address and permission from the property management company to visit before Emma's belongings were donated to charity. She'd also provided him with copies of Emma's notebook entries, 17 separate mentions of dreams about a brother named Daniel over the past 2 years. Emma had lived in a small one-bedroom apartment near the university where she worked as a research coordinator. The building was older but well-maintained, with wide windows that let in plenty of natural light. The superintendent, Mr. Kowalski, was a gentleman in his 70s who spoke about Emma with genuine fondness. She was quiet, like you, he told Daniel as they climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. Always said hello, always paid her rent on time. She mentioned having family somewhere, but I never saw any visitors. Nice girl though. Real nice girl. The apartment was exactly as Daniel had imagined Emma's space would be. Books lined the walls, plants hung from the ceiling and crowded the windowsills, and her furniture was simple but comfortable. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a mountain, was a photo of Emma with her college friends. The same smile, the same bright eyes, now 26 instead of 8. Mr. Kowalski left Daniel alone to look through Emma's things. The notebook Linda had mentioned was on the kitchen table, open to a page dated 3 months ago. Emma's handwriting was neat and thoughtful. Dreamed about Daniel again. We were sitting at a kitchen table and he was telling me about his work. Felt so real, like a memory instead of a dream. Why do I keep dreaming about someone I've never met? Daniel flipped through more pages, finding scattered references to their imaginary conversations. She'd dreamed about him explaining how to fix a broken faucet, about them sharing pizza while watching old movies, about him giving her advice about a job interview. The details were startlingly similar to the fictional relationship he'd created, as if somehow she'd been experiencing the other half of the story he'd been telling. In Emma's bedroom, he found a small wooden box on her dresser filled with family photographs. Most were from her childhood with her grandparents, but at the bottom was a business card for a genealogy service and a handwritten note. Maybe Daniel is a distant cousin? The dreams feel too real to ignore. Daniel sat on Emma's bed, surrounded by the life of a woman he'd never met but had somehow known for 8 years. On her nightstand was a library book about the psychology of dreams and coincidence, with several pages marked with sticky notes. She'd been trying to understand their connection just as desperately as he was now. The final entry in Emma's notebook was dated 1 week before her accident. Called the genealogy people today. They're going to help me search for any family connections to Daniel Martinez. I know it sounds crazy, but what if these dreams mean something? What if we're supposed to know each other? Daniel closed the notebook and looked around the apartment one more time. On Emma's desk, he found a letter she'd started writing but never finished. It was addressed to him, though she'd had to look up his address through public records. The letter began, "Dear Daniel, you don't know me, but I think we might be connected somehow. I've been having dreams about you for 2 years now, and I can't shake the feeling that you're real and that you're important to me." That evening, Daniel met with Linda one final time before driving home. She'd spent the day going through Emma's genealogy research and had made a surprising discovery. "There's no blood relation between you and Emma," Linda explained. "But there is a connection. Emma's grandfather, Robert Whitmore, the photographer who took that original family photo, had a business partner named Carlos Martinez. They ran a small photography studio together in the 1980s. Daniel's heart stopped. "Carlos Martinez was my father's name. Your father and Emma's grandfather were friends and business partners for over a decade. They lost touch when your father moved to a different state, but they maintained a correspondence for years. Emma grew up hearing stories about her grandfather's friend Carlos and his family. She probably heard your name mentioned throughout her childhood, even if she didn't consciously remember it. The pieces finally clicked into place. Somewhere in both their subconscious minds, Emma and Daniel had carried traces of a connection formed by their grandfather's friendship. When Daniel found her photograph and began creating stories about a sister, and when Emma began dreaming about a brother, they were both responding to an ancient echo of family friendship. 6 months later, Daniel attended Emma's memorial service in Wisconsin, where he met her elderly neighbors and former co-workers. He brought the original photograph book and donated it to the local library in Emma's memory. He also brought the folder of emails he'd written to himself from Emma's fake email account, and he read one of them aloud, a message about finding beauty in small moments and the importance of human connection. After the service, Daniel visited Emma's grave and left a copy of their shared photograph. He no longer carried her picture in his wallet. He didn't need to anymore. The story he'd created about having a sister had somehow, impossibly, led him to discover that he'd truly had one all along, just not in the way anyone could have predicted. Standing in the quiet cemetery, Daniel finally understood that some connections transcend the boundaries of blood and time. Emma had existed in his life long before he found her photograph, and would continue to exist in ways that mattered, even after her death. Sometimes the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and who we love turn out to be more true than we ever imagined possible.
Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more interesting content coming soon.